I told myself I wasn't going to get all sappy, but dang, it was hardly a year ago that we sat right across town in my garage and clocked in 100,000 marvelous viewers. Well, most of them anyway. Now look at us. 500,000. I got talking to a buddy of mine. I don't know if I really have a feeling for how many people that really is. And he sent me this picture. 5 times. Now, I don't want to make a big thing of this. I know this ain't New Year's Eve in Times Square, but I plan on dropping the ball tonight. We should celebrate. Nothing fancy, but still. I thought we could have a nice dinner and chat about some of my favorite tools. This might not all be tools. I mean, we'll start off with tools, but this will likely be a collection of just stuff I like. I'm sure we'll get off topic soon enough.
Welcome to the barbecue pit. Can I help you get started?
Calm down, fella. I'm working on it.
No, I mean started with dinner.
Oh, right. Sorry. Some breadsticks. I'd love some breadsticks.
How about something to drink?
Some champagne, please. It's a special occasion.
Does this place look like it does champagne?
How about some Asti Spumani?
That's champagne.
No, it's Martini and Rossi Asti Spumani.
I'm pretty sure it's champagne.
No, it's, look, just something bubbly.
We've got 7-Up.
Let's do this totally random. Luck of the draw. And our first winner is parallel jaw pliers. Granted, we could have started off a bit stronger, but if these are new to you, allow me to introduce parallel jaw pliers. Now, I came to these rather late in the game, but ever since adding 2 to my collection, I find myself reaching for them more and more. Like the name says, the jaws in these stay parallel through their entire range. You know when you're trying to belt sand something small like a bolt and you're standing there with your pliers grinding away right as rain until you turn the pliers 90 degrees and boom, just like that you've ground a bevel into the nose of your pliers and your part quantum leaped to the 4th dimension, never to be found again. Well, these help keep that from happening. They keep a nice square grip on things. Dare I say, parallel. You get more than just 2 points of contact than you might get with regular pliers. Though they're not as big, so you don't get as much force. It's for smaller work. They're absolutely great for pulling keys out of keyways without really tearing them up. You know, holding small parts so they don't wobble. I think these speak for themselves. I got them in square and I don't know what these are called. Half round, needle nose. I've always meant to get the full round version. This version that sort of looks like snap ring pliers have completely round jaws, like 2 parallel pins. It might be more of a jeweler's thing, but I bet they'd be great for forming wire, or working with springs, that sort of thing. If you've never used these before, I suggest giving them a try, especially if you tend to work with smaller stuff. Level of control compared to traditional needle nose pliers is just through the roof. But anyway, let's move on. We got a lot of ground to cover. All right, let's see. Next up. No. How on earth did this get in there? My old Colin voodoo doll. Yeah, I could have sworn I burnt this thing. Machinist Handbook banned these things back in the 30s or the 40s, I think. You know, though, I wonder if...
Get me a bit of bread. Doing that. Jeez! Tony! Stop!
Where's your safety tie now, Colin? Hold on, before we get too deep into this, I'd just like to make something clear. What you'll be seeing is more than half a lifetime of throwing money away on stuff. Unless you just hit the lotto or knocked over some old lady, you don't decide to get into metalworking and buy all this stuff overnight. It takes time. Not to mention that most of the stuff you'll see here is used. When you start off doing this stuff, it'll likely feel like you're missing everything. You'll get all excited and want to make a new cup holder for your bike and realize all you have is a carpenter's hammer and some rusty coat hangers. That's totally fine. We all started off with that cup holder. Let the other kids laugh. It works, doesn't it? Well, most of the time anyway. But slowly, along the way, you'll pick up another tool here and maybe a machine there. Some of them will have been worth it. Some of them you'll never use again. Anyway, calipers. My absolute favorite, hands down, calipers are these Mitutoyo diamond somethings. I'll put the model number up on the screen. These are called parallax free calipers because the scales are on the same plane. The vernier scale and the main scale are on the same surface. The rails are ground into V's, which I assume is where the diamond name comes from. Because of that, the vernier scale is flat. And well, you guessed it, no parallax error. And let's face it, it's 2019. I mean, who has time for parallax error? If it tells you anything, these are the only calipers I've ever owned that actually get wiped down and put back in their case. These are veneer calipers. I know some people don't like that. I had some resistance to that myself when I first started out. I wanted everything digital. But these have turned into my absolute favorites. Now, I do own a pair of digital calipers. 1 second. Sorry, I left them over by the bar. This is the ubiquitous 6-inch Mitutoyo. Bought these new, heck, over 10 years ago probably, as a set. Came in this nice box with a digital micrometer, which you might have noticed is suspiciously absent. I don't know what happened to it exactly. I dropped it one too many times or eventually got coolant in it. I did even get it repaired once, but, well, it's no longer with us. The fact that it let me down like that, even though it was more than likely my fault, slightly put me off electronic measuring devices. Really, that's no longer the case. And if I could afford another set, I might actually use it. But in the meantime, I've become very accustomed to traditional measuring tools. In particular, I took a liking to these dial calipers. These are Brown & Sharps, and although no longer brown, they still look quite sharp. These are the inch and metric versions. In theory, these are the calipers I prefer. I like seeing the relative distance I need to go with just a glance. I suppose it's like the analog versus digital clock face. 34 thou for some reason means a lot more to me intuitively on this dial face than just seeing 34 thou appear on a readout. To some extent, you can also do relative measurements here. Just zero the dial face on your part and work incrementally from there. But I suppose it's just what you get used to. Big downside with dial calipers is they get dirty. There's a very tiny gear rack on the beam that the head registers against. Chips or dirt or sticky vanilla ice cream that gets in there and it's game over for these poor things. I can't tell you how many times I've had them apart to clean them. In fact, the last time I had this inch one apart, I used this one more. Last time I had this one apart, I lost the friction beam that goes in the top and replaced it with a strip of plastic. Probably can't see down in there. It works great, but the drag is a little higher than it used to be. The metric one is a lot smoother, but it doesn't get as much use. I should bring these back into rotation. It does save on a lot of math. I've since relegated these to my desk. If I'm measuring something to get it in the CAD, these are the two that I use. The digital still gets use, but not that much. I like working with the digital Mitutoyo on the lathe, as I can convert from inch to millimeter pretty much on the fly, and can zero it at any point on the scale that I need. See, my lathe is all imperial, so working in metric, this saves some time. My mill, however, has a DRO, so I can do all that there.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Guy, you can't have a milling machine in here.
But since I walk back and forth between the lathe and the mill a lot, and I don't really need the digitals on the mill, I tend to stick to the veneers. It's actually not this one, I can tell them by feel. It looks like I have two. I found this one at a garage sale, but the inch scale is in this ludicrous 1/128ths of an inch division. And every time I try to do the math using that scale, I wake up hours later in a state of confusion. But it's still good for metric, and I can use the inch scale, for finding stock or large measurements, fast measurements. Anyway, these Mitutoyo diamonds, absolutely silky smooth. I can see inch and millimeter conversion instantly without having to push a stinking button. I can see how much is left to go in an analog sort of way. They don't jam up with dirt or strawberry sprinkles. And of course, no parallax. The only downside to these is, well, I'm getting older and they're getting harder to read. Which leads me to my next favorite tool. The Optivisor. And just to be clear, I bought these way before I stopped looking so great. Seeing so great. If you've never worked through a set of these, well, frankly, you haven't lived. It's another world. In fact, I have two of these in two different magnifications. Hold on. Where'd that one get off to? Oh, no way. Tom Lipton. We meet again. If you're watching this channel and you don't know Tom, well, you should. He's top dog and does amazing work over at Ox Tools. Now, true story. Back in about October of 2011, when they were casting for a lead at Ox Tools, it came down to me and Tom. It was brutal. They had us reading twice a day, every day, pushing us, testing our emotive and vocal range. We were neck and neck, so I did what any rational person would do and made one of these. Tom ended up landing the part. Something about me lying on my resume about actually being a machine. But man, when my kids were younger, we used to play a lot of pin the tail on the ox with this thing. What the heck? Once more for old time's sake, got my blindfold on. Let's see if I still got it.
Hey, I better not be catching you doing voodoo magic in here.
I got these in a 5 and a 10. It's not like I remembered that. It's printed right on the lens. Use them both a lot depending on the work at hand. Like I said, these aren't just for hanging out at the mall and looking cool. They're legit optical aids. Like I said, open up new worlds. Okay, I've got to pick things up or we're never going to get out of here. In any more than 30 minutes and I've got to pay parking for the whole night. Micrometers, the workhorses of any shop. When I get into machining, you need micrometers. I think I've mentioned before, I really like these digital mechanicals. It's digital in sort of the original sense of that word, but not battery powered. What do you call it these days? Steampunk? Now, I only have this style in 3 sizes, 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and 2 to 3. And then your usual motley mix of regular micrometers up to about 10 inches, I think. Though 0 to 3 usually covers like 99% of what I do. But what I'm really writing to you about is this Starrett multi-anvil. These are sometimes called uni-mikes. I think maybe Mitutoyo might call them uni-mikes, in the sense that it's the only mic you'll ever need until you need a different one. This is a clever mic to have, and if you're just starting out, look for them used. Once you get familiar with them, they're very versatile. Before you accumulate your arsenal of measuring tools, this thing can fill a lot of shoes, or maybe it's wear a lot of hats. I don't remember. I always get those mixed up. And the trick up this mic sleeve is that you can replace the anvil. This is a 0 to 1 inch mic, but if you compare it to, say, a standard micrometer, you can see with that sort of gauge block thing in there, it's a lot thinner than the anvil on a classic mic. So it lets you get into fine features, inside small grooves, places where a larger anvil wouldn't fit. You can also replace this anvil. That slips out and make sure everything's nice and clean. And you can replace this with, say, like a gauge pin. A gauge pin gives you a rounded surface, so you can measure things like wall thickness of pipe and tubing, right? A regular mic has a flat anvil. If you put that up against the inside curvature of, say, a piece of tubing, well, you'll get an error because that's touching off on 2 spots instead of the exact inside diameter. Whereas a pin here would give you the exact distance across the wall thickness. But you could use that pin to measure to wherever you like. Sky's the limit. Maybe you need to pick up the exact position of some small hole off the edge of a part. In addition, you can remove the anvil altogether, and you can use this as a height gauge, sort of a depth micrometer, though it can't really get down deep into features. But you can measure a step height or a part height. You'd want to do this on your surface plate, of course, and not in the middle of a restaurant. But it can be really handy on the milling machine. So you're trying to measure a step or a feature on a part that's too large for your largest micrometer. You can come in with this and measure the feature directly. I think they're a solid addition to a starter toolkit, especially used. Oh dear, I didn't even know I had this. Now this is a tough one. With great power comes great... Okay, this is a bit of a stretch maybe for a machining channel, but given all the great years we've had together, I'd be remiss not including my all-time favorite pocket knife. I present to you the Swiss Army Sentinel. Although now I'm just the shell of the man I used to be and make do with one of these things on my keychain, me and the Sentinel, boy what a fitting name. Me and this thing spent a good, 15 years together if not more. Everywhere I went, there it was in my back pocket. In fact, let me see if I can show you. I still have a divot on my right butt. This one happens to be brand new. I still have the case. It's got to be 10 years old judging by how yellow that's gotten. But I've never used it. I'm not going to show you my ratty, worn-out old one on camera. At one point, I decided I liked these enough and bought 3 or 4 of them. This is the only new one I have left. I guess now this thing is going to my boy or my girl, when they're old enough to be in knife fights, of course. But you just sit there and tell me this isn't the most handsome, mass-produced, locking single blade ever made. Now, I know there are probably a lot of knife people out there crawling out of their skin saying the steel stinks or the lock is made of kicked puppy tears. But fact of the matter, I've put these things through heck and back. I've worn these things out, but I've never managed to actually break one or have one fail. No scales have fallen off, no blade breaks or chips, just one reliable knife. Now, like any other blue-blooded American, I did, of course, go through a Leatherman phase. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Leatherman, but for me, it was just too heavy hanging on my belt. Sure, I looked like a tough guy walking around until I'd make a scene getting caught on a doorknob or not being able to get my seatbelt out from around it. I know, tough guys don't wear seatbelts, but it was a hassle. Though I still carry one in my glove box. My boy gets more use out of it than I do, to be honest. He really likes the saw in this thing. I can't blame him, it's a good saw. Now, what would a machinist tool roundup be without... Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's that blinking red light mean?
It means I'm recording a video.
What, for like YouTube or something?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact. Ever heard of a guy that goes by This Old Tony?
Nah, never heard of him. But have you ever watched A-Bomb 79? Now that guy, man, he's legit. Have you ever seen any of the episodes where he turns those big gearbox shafts? Man, it's amazing. Oh, and he's got a big metal shaper and an old...
Probably no surprise, but my favorite indicator also happens to be the most expensive. This is the Inter-Rapid. You might notice this is the one that comes out most of the time. Now, one of these things, new, will set you back around $300. It really is like a fine watch, though, and is probably your most used tool if you get into machining. Personally, having used one, I think a new one is worth it. Now, that said, I got this one on eBay for about half that price. I did have to spend a couple extra bucks to get it officially repaired, though. I mean, it worked fine, but the bezel had a rough spot in it. Must have gotten dropped. Probably the most important thing about indicators, especially the finer resolution ones, after accuracy of course, is that they stay where you put them and be absolutely silky smooth. These Inter-Rapids have a nice friction hinge stem and dovetails pretty much all over the body. You can hook up to these rails in almost an infinite number of configurations. And the bezel now is silky smooth. Again, especially down when you're measuring tenths, you're trying to bump the face over just 1 or 2 tenths. The last thing you want is moving the bezel and having it affect your entire reading, having to reset it and readjust it. Another really nice one, also got on eBay at an absolute steal, is this Compact, and also an absolute gem to work with. This one's a bit weird in that it's metric, but I couldn't turn it down. I don't do a lot of measuring in metric, but for measuring relative changes, it's really all the same. And being a back plunger style, it's sometimes more useful in certain situations. But what turned out to be quite surprising is this little Mitutoyo tenths indicator. This is probably the only indicator I ever bought new, and I think I paid a hair over $100, though it came with a full kit of clamps and bars and all that stuff. Compared to the Swiss-made indicators, it is surprisingly nice to use. The face is a little small. If it were a little larger, that'd be nice. Make it a little bit easier to read. The bezel is plastic. It does suffer from a little bit of stiction when you first break it out of the cabinet. So turning it a couple of times in either direction kind of limbers it up a bit. And it's got this side lever I almost always forget about. This indicator is sort of bidirectional. It measures both ways you push the stem. In fact, I think every other indicator besides this one worked that way. So I don't know if this is a feature or for a special use, but this will only measure in one direction. I can't pull it forward in this case, but I can push it back, unless I flip that lever. Now I can't push it back, but I can pull it forward. Though that does help you keep track of which way your measurements are going, if they're positive or negative. If the surface you're measuring is coming up towards you or dropping away. This, sometimes I have to think twice about it, but it's got lines marked in one direction between the 0 and the 15 going clockwise that help you keep track of which way is which. Whoa! Alright, this last one is a bit out there, but bear with me. Now, don't get me wrong, I could talk for hours about tools. Take them out of some magic box and parade them in front of you like they're objects. But I'm going to go out on a limb here. Try to help a few people out. Maybe save you some money so you can buy a few more tools for yourself. I don't think anyone disputes the fact that all of the best hobby machinists are clean shaven. But how do you get that? Feather razors. They'll cut your face clean off. This isn't an ad, though. That's got to be the best tagline I've ever heard. I have no affiliation with them. I'm just trying to pass along some advice here. And likely this is old news to most of you, but maybe it helps a couple of kids out. Quick backstory just to put this into a bit of perspective for you. I personally am a seasonal beard kind of a guy. Summer, when it's hot out, clean shaven. Winter, when it's cold, I've got a beard. Not a Neanderthal beard, mind you. I still shave. You know, keep it neat. I'll have you know quite a few women watch this channel. And my stubble? Well, frankly, it's a force of nature. This is a piece of 316 stainless. I personally prefer a straight razor. I'm not one of those guys that's all about inexplicable existential bliss of a good shave. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But if we really want to get down to brass tacks here, and you're asking me where it's at, well, this is where it's at. A little bit of an investment up front for a good razor and some auxiliary equipment, but after that, you're set for life. Or at least until you're too old to use one and accidentally cut your own throat. Safety razors. I used to absolutely hate these things. I got into these mostly because I remember my grandfather always using one. But when I tried them, they'd tear up my face and I'd run out and buy that expensive plastic junk. Now, those disposables are convenient, I won't deny that. But as with any convenience, there is a trade-off. I'll save you the whole spiel of why I don't think those are worth your money, but I was saying I didn't really like safety razors until I was introduced to these unassuming little spawns of Satan. Again, except for a straight razor, these really must be the sharpest things known to man. First time you load one of these into your razor, odds are pretty high you'll cut your face open. I say that only partially in jest. Don't just jump in and go to town like it's a disposable razor. If you're lucky, you'll live to regret doing that. So in my experience, I get a much better shave with one of these things than with the disposables. Safety razors themselves don't cost all that much. It's been a while since I actually bought these things, but I just checked and they're about 20 cents a piece if you buy the 100 count box. Like I said, 9 out of every 10 shaves I use the razor, but I keep these around for when I'm in a hurry. Need to get out the door quick. You can't use a straight razor when you're in a hurry. Not more than once anyway. So that's it, I think. If you've never had a straight razor shave, go to a barber that still does that, if you can even find one. Pay for a shave and see for yourself. If you're not quite ready for that sort of life-threatening commitment, that's fine. Get yourself a safety razor and try some of these feathers. Again, absolutely no affiliation. They just happen to be a game changer for me. They're comparatively cheap, they last a decent amount of time, and coming from me, that really means something. And you'll get a much better shave than you will with those disposables. And of course, you'll save a ton of money in the long run. Okay. I really got to go now. I don't know why. Maybe it's the cold, but my hand is really starting to bother me.
You think that's funny, dear Tony? Two can play at this game. Ha! Deal with that, Mr. Hand Channel.
Whoa!